And was it also a shock that he had a meal with Asim Munir?
Which, sorry? Yeah, I mean, that was a bit of a puzzle. First of all, I don't think there's any precedent for a military officer who is not a head of state or government to be received by the president in the White House. So that's a completely unprecedented action. And the fact that it was done with so much warmth and bonhomie was also surprising. I can tell you frankly that on this particular thing, there's obviously a personal element in what Mr. Trump is saying and doing that we'll have to reckon with. The American system does give an enormous amount of latitude to the personal tastes, foibles, and whims of the man in the office. I mean, the assumption has always been that the system will throw up people who are so seasoned by the process of politics that they will be moderate and measured and responsible in every utterance and every decision. We don't seem to have that right now. And so all of us, I think, not just India, but every country in the world is having to very quickly readjust its sights in understanding and relating to the gentleman.
It's quite surprising that it's the allies who are getting hit most with all the shifting grammar, as we titled.
Absolutely. And you know, you've seen the way in which Mr. Trump spoke to Mr. Zelensky in the White House the first time. He was a little better off this time, but he had a rough time the first time he went. You've seen the way in which some of those NATO meetings and meetings with the European leaders have gone. We're in a very, very different sort of diplomatic world at the moment with Mr. Trump.
Let me just work on the title a little bit. I was thinking it's shifting grammar, but I also noticed that you're a big cricket buff. So I was wondering, is it a bad heading lay or a Perth pitch where you have to bat? If you were to pull out a shot in such conditions, what would that be?
Well, I mean, certainly there's no question that with Mr. Trump, the second innings, the pitch has deteriorated considerably. The climate, as it were, literally has not been particularly conducive to our batting. But I understood Piyush's very positive messaging, which is necessary for a minister in his position. I think that when we listened to him, we got this slightly sort of confident, optimistic approach to all of this. I'll admit that I'm not in the government and I'm a little more worried. I'm hearing reports of serious cancellations of orders when it comes to garments, leather, seafood, which affects my state, and of course gems and jewelry. We've all read reports of 1.5 lakh jewelry workers being laid off in Surat. That's all worrying. And some of this started before the second 25%. It started with the first 25%, which already put us at a serious disadvantage with all our competitors in these sectors. Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they're all between 15 and 19%. So 25 already puts our exporters at a negative premium, and that has to be negotiated down, and that's what our Commerce Ministry under Piyush was negotiating with the Americans. I'm afraid that that 25 has to come down, or we are in deep trouble in a number of sectors where we have been doing well in the US. The second 25%, of course, is the killer. Yeah. That's not really a tariff, that's a sanction. That is an absolute sort of geopolitical bludgeon that's been applied on us, with the indirect target being Russia. And the very fact that on the 27th of August we could be at 50% unless it's held in abeyance at the last minute, and that China will be at 30%, despite importing far more oil and gas from Russia than we do, suggests to me that the cards we hold are not as strong as we'd like to claim.
So what would be the prescription you would put out?
Look, I mean, I think some of the answers are obvious. Piyush himself implied some of them. One is diversification of markets, obviously indispensable. We have to go and look to other countries. We've got a good UK free trade agreement. We're talking to the EU. There are other agreements in the works. Great. And then much more stimulus to domestic demand so we can actually have the domestic consumption rise to a point where we can absorb some of this. Those two are the obvious things. And then, of course, exploring completely new markets. I mean, we haven't shown enough energy over Africa. There are successful economies in Africa growing. Let's go and get those markets and other markets in Asia as well. So to my mind, the answers are obvious. Getting there is not going to be easy, and there will be pain in the short term. One thing Piyush didn't mention, which because I'm not in government I can fool around with, is maybe there should be some very enterprising Indian importer in the UK who can import a lot of these items at duty-free prices, repackage them as made in the UK and sell them to America. I mean, that's something else that could also happen.
Okay, diplomat, politician can also be a good businessman.
No, I'm told that's what the Dubai people have been doing with Pakistan. A lot of Pakistanis enjoy Indian goods as long as the package says, made in the UAE.
Well, it's nice, the friendly banter you bring in when you're talking about the trade minister, and we also see your comments in public. When people like me started reporting, we were all schooled. On foreign policy, there's a consensus across the aisle in India. And so when you went to parliament, you can ask questions here, there, but there is this unwritten consensus. Then a view started coming, why can't foreign policy also be debated? After all, in the rest of democracies, one party has a certain thinking, the other party. It doesn't always have to be a consensus. You had the panel today. The times are such. How do you see it? You think this consensus-based approach should be revisited, or you think that should be reinvented? How do you see this opposition-government conversation on foreign policy in particular?
Well, there isn't much of a conversation, but certainly speaking for the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament, I think we are all on the same page by and large. I remember saying when I first chaired the committee back in 2014 that there is no such thing as a Congress foreign policy and a BJP foreign policy. There's only Indian foreign policy and Indian national interests, and we all stand up for those. In between, yes, there have been some differences on some matters, but by and large, the fundamental interests of the nation affect us all, and it's therefore not untypical for people to rally around the flag, whatever the details or disagreements of detail might be. And Nehru put it very effectively, who lives if India dies? When it comes to something that affects as an existential crisis for the country, when it comes to something that is a critical moment at which our country's security and fundamental interests are at stake, no Indian can afford to take a totally different stand. Even the Americans have this line of, our differences stop at the water's edge. Well, in our case, they should stop at the borders.